you're also a very fast thinker. So the ability to analyze and then come out with something that seems to have a certain sense of clarity and vision to what you're able to pull out of it.
In the United States, you always say that you're a melting pot where people have to come in and melt into being a part of the society. Where in Canada, we say we're a mosaic.
I see this with Sir Richard Branson, with Drake. That first big, large first letter in the T and that dynamic T-bar that shoots across, that is an energy. So it's projecting an energy. I'm seeing somebody who feels deeply. Hey, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show. I'm Jamie Mason Cohen, and we have Tom Rhodes on today. Tom is a world-traveling comedian who is now celebrating his 30th year as a stand-up comic. Or 40 years. 40 years, wow. The New York Times...
57, I started when I was 17.
Wow, there you go, 37 years. The New York Times describes him as a mostly natural intellect with a knack for reporting the harsh realities of life with a dark and absurdly optimistic cynicism. Comedian, actor, host, travel writer, and host of the podcast, the Tom Rhodes Smart Camp, and so much more. Tom, welcome to the Signature Leadership Show.
Hey, Jamie, thank you so much for having me, my friend.
I really appreciate it.
The Times review was written 20 years ago, so I don't think I have any dark cynicism anymore. I think I've matured and moved to a little higher enlightenment. So,
and that's
when I was younger, I think there was a little more cynicism in it, you know.
Well, perfect, because that's where I want to start, because we met 24 years ago in New York. Well, not exactly New York, in the U.S. when I was working for Lorne Michaels. And I was asked to...
I think our journey started in New York, and we drove up to New England together.
That's right.
I was just telling my mother about us.
Yes. And that's where I met you for the first time, because you were the headliner of this show that went to universities across different parts of the United States. And I was lucky enough to be on that tour. And my first impression of you was incredibly smart, charismatic, really like a force of nature, like a larger than life presence. And you also kept a journal. And I always remembered that because you were the only other person who I knew, especially the only other man who was walking around with a journal. So
yeah, I still keep one.
Okay, you still keep one.
Yeah.
And you said that the bio is a little bit out of date because you don't represent necessarily what was described of you, at least in the public-facing forum, the New York Times seeing you on stage, as you are today. And that was 24 years later. So what I thought I'd love to start off with to frame this conversation is let's look at your handwriting from a postcard you wrote to me when we knew each other then. And let's see if there are any traits that might be different today and maybe what stayed the same. And see what the evolution of Tom is. So before we look at the past, which I'm going to put up on the screen, that postcard, can you write the following two sentences that you see on the screen? And for those of you who are watching at home, you can also try this as well and see how you might compare to Tom in terms of your traits that I pull out. And so, Tom, can you take a moment and write the following two sentences that might not be clear on this screen? I'm going to make it as big.
But the text is a little small. There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
I have contact lenses in.
Yeah. So, but I'll say it aloud. Could you write this and print it if you have a moment? It's okay if we take some time, and then write your signature underneath. If you signed an autograph, what would you write? And we're going to use that strange sentence as a grounding of what traits might have stayed the same and what might have been different over the past 24 years. Because one question I get with handwriting analysis is, does handwriting stay the same or does it change? And it changes and evolves how we change. And it stays the same where some of our values or principles also stay the same. And those particular sentences can give us a quick snapshot or the eye test of which traits have evolved and stayed the same. And I am coming from this strictly looking at the traits because Tom and I have not spoken in quite some time. And I'm looking at it with what information we have in front of us. So if you can write it in cursive, even though you might not have done that since fourth grade. And
Yeah. Because I'm writing on my knee, and
yeah,
I
that's okay. We'll
do
make the
you,
best with what
you
we
need
have.
it in cursive because I just did it in my normal writing.
You do it, then you do it in your normal writing because that is what you're most comfortable with, and that will give us a good place to start. So as soon as you're done, what I'm going to do, perfect. So you're going to keep that in a second. Let's look at the past for a moment. If you can look up on the screen here, this is Tom Rhodes in his probably early 30s, about 24 years ago or so. And I'm just going to point out a few things. We're not going to spend that much time here. There's a few things that stand out to me, and I am looking at the writing. I actually have, for reference, the journal, because this is what one of the things that drew me to Tom was I have the actual journal from that time frame that I'm referencing. And here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing somebody who feels deeply. So really still waters run deep. That's the depth of your writing is quite strong at that time. Yet you're not necessarily grounded. You're someone on the move because the line of the writing. So for example, on the line, hope you are cool, all of your dreams, which is the fifth line down, your writing goes up and then down. So you have this adaptability. But sometimes when people are that adaptable, because it's consistent in the writing, it tends to be people who are on the move or not necessarily settled in any way. So it's someone who's constantly in the move. The actual printing of the writing, it shows me a guarded vulnerability. So it's someone who doesn't necessarily open up unless they really trust and get to know people. And I'm also going to say someone who's highly independent with the Roman numeral one. It looks like that Roman numeral on the top and the bottom. That's someone who's independent, who's carved their own path. You're sensitive at that time in your life. In your signature, there's big loops, which is someone who cares what people think of them, who care about how they're perceived. And yet the capital I, which is your ego, your sense of self, it's tall. So there's a good sense of self, at least publicly, but actually, even though you come across as confident, sometimes you're very hard on yourself because the eye is slanted backward. So it's tall. So I'm coming across as confident outside, but inside I'm quite hard on myself. And sometimes your eye strokes go backwards. So you would be performing as a comic or as an actor, but you would be your own worst critic because there's a certain like Shakespearean arrow shooting right back at yourself, like Hamlet. And a few other things about you would be highly observant at that time, analytical. So the ability to see the world. And I'll tell you, there's one trait which is extreme intellect when it comes to analysis is your M's and N's are you don't see the hump. It just goes almost like a check mark. And you see that in the fourth last line. It says, you can email me through my website, and the M on website is a series of sharp strokes. Uh, well, I think that's pretty good. I think, just in summary, highly sensitive about perception, confident on the outside, but inside very hard on yourself. You're adapting. You're moving constantly in your life, not necessarily grounded at that time. Incredibly high intellect in terms of observational and the ability to cut to the core and seeing things that other people might not in terms of your analysis and extracting those details from a situation and articulating it. You're also a very fast thinker. So the ability to analyze and then come out with something that seems to have a certain sense of clarity and vision to what you're able to pull out of it. So those are some quick things that I see from Tom Rhodes in 2000. How does that sit with you?
I think everything that you just said is still 100% accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. And me looking at this handwriting, I think I might have been in a little bit of a hurry because normally I write even more clearer than that. And then I'll never forget when we were in that van and we were doing this tour in New England, and it was such a great tour because we were doing all these great Ivy League schools. So they were really young, very intelligent audiences, and I have such a great memory of that. And then you and I becoming friends and bonding. And I remember you telling me about, you were like an expert in handwriting analysis. So I felt a little nervous when I handed you my comedy notebook to look through. And the thing that you said that always stuck with me, you said, you're a person that wants to be perfectly clear with your message and the things that you're saying. And that's one of the reasons why your handwriting is so strong and bold and whatever. So you want to see what I just how I wrote this?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going
So
to take this off the screen now and let's replace it with,
here, let me get a little light on this.
yeah, so I can see it. And what I'm going to ask you to do is hold it up and let's see if we can see you while I'm looking at it to see your immediate response. And we can riff off of seeing what stayed the same and what's different.
Does that because I wrote with oh
Invisible ink. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay. Okay, so here's a few things. That that sensitivity, that ability to empathize with other people, but also, really caring, for example, what the audience thinks in the public domain, that's still there. That's still there 25 years later. I'm highly sensitive. It's a blessing and it can be a curse if it's overextended in certain areas. But publicly, that's your signature. Your signature, Tom, is what you want the world to see. Your writing is who you truly are. And oftentimes, there are traits in the public domain that might be a little bit different than how people are. But in your case, there's real consistency. The actual D shows sensitivity about how you come across publicly, which I think is a great trait, especially as a comedian, because you want to connect with the audience. Your S on Rhodes is a figure eight. I'm from Canada, so figure eights with skating, that shows a fluency of thought. It's weaving linguistic lassos. So the ability to speak quickly, articulately, with clarity, that ability where your mind is working so fast, it's almost hard for you to keep up with yourself. When you're writing things down, your mind is already working a mile a minute. Now, there's a real dynamic energy in that signature. That signature is what I see with successful, charismatic people. I see this with Sir Richard Branson, with Drake. That first big, large first letter in the T, and that dynamic T bar that shoots across, that is an energy. So it's projecting an energy. And you said you're not necessarily a cynical optimist, or however New York Times described you. You're more of an optimist now without that cynicism. Cynicism tends to have a negative connotation. It's almost like the way I see it is everything has an agenda behind it. So even though someone is coming across kind to you, there's always an undercurrent or an agenda. There's a negative intention. There's no negative intention in your handwriting. There's the fluency in that S. There's the sensitivity, both sensitivity about how you come across, but also sensitivity projected to your partner, to your family, to your close friends. They see that. There's a wanting to acquire knowledge. There's a passion to acquire knowledge. And it's so small, but on the T bar on the T, there is a hook. You'll see it when you put it down. That little hook on the upper zone is the ability to want more information, an obsession almost in a positive way, to want to learn, to want to grow, to want to develop, constantly a never-ending lifelong learner in the top T bar. And that T bar also is like Frank Sinatra's. That's a visionary T bar. If you look at the F and the T in Frank Sinatra's signature, that is someone who is persistent toward their goals. It's a long T bar that knows no rest. It actually gets stronger right at the tip. Harry Fox, a famous Canadian, who ran the Marathon of Hope and didn't stop 25 miles a day. I'm not comparing you to Terry Fox in that way, but Terry Fox, right at the end of his handwriting, there was a dot at the end of the T bar. And the end of the T bar dot, it's just when things get tougher for you in life. You might have a bit of a drop, a human level of energy drop, but that's when you get toughest and strongest. When things are sometimes bleak, that's when you project sometimes at your best professionally. That's what that's showing. So those traits are in alignment, although I would say they're even more pronounced. You've developed them even more over those 25 years. Now let's look at your writing. How are we doing so far?
Great.
Okay. So let's look at your writing. So there's one difference, and please correct me if I'm wrong. You and listen to my voice tone because I'm going to project it with my voice. You're more grounded now than you might have been 25 years ago in
That's
mentally. Yeah. So when I say grounded, I'm talking about the Buddhist level of internal ground. Well, Buddhism might say groundlessness, but I'm talking about if you think of someone who is not in a rush as much, who is working at a certain stillness, a certain of allowing, not necessarily rushing or moving or traveling as much, someone who has got a sense of clarity and a little more comfortable with the uncertainty, just allowing things to happen as opposed to trying to hustle and pushing so hard. Yet you still have the same depth in the writing. That's depth is emotional responsiveness. Someone who will laugh and cry when they experience a traumatic or a victorious moment and be able to feel that in other people. So there's a depth of feeling that you present in your writing. Yet what's interesting here is you can also be alone. You don't necessarily need to be surrounded by people. There's part of you in that why where it's not necessarily a loner, but you're okay to be alone at times. And you still have that really strong typewriting. That's that clarity of, I would say, clarity of intention, clarity of thought, like a deep thinker, but a clear thinker.
That's what
Every
you told me. Those were the words, clarity of intention. That's what you told me 25 years ago. I
Yeah.
remember that.
So that has stayed the same as well, is that clarity of intention. And I'll tell you, if someone's saying, well, you know each other. No, we don't know each other that well. I've followed you from over the years, but this is not, we haven't been in the same room in 20 something years. What I'm seeing there is the letters, every single letter is clear. And that clarity is clarity of ethics. You know who you are. You know what your values are. You still take time to let people in. You're not letting everybody in. You'll have the same friends for 25, 30, 40 years. You will really take time before you let someone into your life in a relationship. But once you're in, you are loyal. You are honest. You're honest all the time. If you look at your O's are like Gandhi. There's a certain circularity to them. And my mother, there's a really clear O. That really clear O in the middle zone tends to be integrity. You walk your talk. That's authenticity in your comedy. That's authenticity in your relationships. And that's authenticity in how you want to be perceived. You are who you say you are and how you act. Those are a few things about Tom Rhodes today.
Jamie, we should talk more often.
How does that land with you?
I think you're right on the money. Yeah. I am very sensitive. You know, I cry at a good steak. I cry easily when the things that make me happy. I mean, not like, you know, all the time, but like very important things. And certain moments of elevated joy, I've dropped tears. But I'm very sensitive to human stories and things in movies or television shows. And yeah, and my life is constantly observing, and I have a massive book collection. I have my living room is full of thousands of books. I always dreamt of having a massive library. I always thought that was part of a well-developed human being. And so I never went to university. So I started as a comedian when I was 17 and went on the road when I was 18. So I felt like I needed to educate myself. And then traveling the world, I've always, you know, I'll find, you know, I'll read books about the places, not travel guides, but like real valuable information. You know, like I went to Mongolia and I read Genghis Khan's biography, and in France, the French writers and things like that. So I've always thought that, you know, to be a great comedian, you have to put, you know, information into your computer brain so it comes out. And I'm constantly observing. And also being a comedian is somewhat of a matador's existence. You're by yourself out there in the arena, and you have to spend a lot of time alone. I think like during the pandemic, it hit a lot of people really hard being isolated by themselves. But I know a lot of comedians, it didn't affect them that much because we're so conditioned to sitting in hotel rooms by ourselves and traveling by ourselves. And I've always used that time traveling and being by myself to read. I love documentaries. That's why I love that tour we did so much, because it wasn't just, random universities. It was, like I remember particularly the Emerson University. That was a real thrill because I really loved the writings of Emerson. He was a great thinker and, outlook on how to exist and operate as a human being, And I want to be really clear. I like everything you said, and I like that your mom and Gandhi and I have the same O's.
You have the same host. I don't think you thought coming into this conversation that would be a line you'd utter. Uh,
I can't wait to tell my mom.
Please tell your mom. Yeah. What is a book you're reading now?
Um, so I have some daily readers. You want me to grab them real quick?
Yeah.
Because I bring them with me. Okay. So I'm on about the third year of reading this book, and I've read, I think, everything this guy has put out. I'm really into Stoicism.
Yep.
I love Seneca and Marcus Aurelius.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy, Ryan Holiday, has got this daily Stoic book.
Yeah.
And it's a little tattered because I think I'm on my third year of reading the daily.
Yeah.
I'll when I'm starting my day with my coffee, I'll read these. And this one, someone gave me last year. It's
The Golden
Present Daily Inspirational Readings by Sri Swami Satchidananda.
Yeah.
And I really love Hafez, this Sufi mystic poet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are really into Rumi,
Mm-hmm.
but Hafiz, all of his writings are about God, love, and dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So he has this really kind of playful mischievousness to his poetry. So this is a really great book I found 2 years ago. I think I'm on my second cycle of that. And I just found this Hafiz's daily, it's a little book of life, but like a lot of poetry books, there'll be like, 8 words on each page. I need a little more than that. But Hafiz wrote a book called I Heard God Laughing.
Mm.
And it's a really thin poetry book. It's fantastic. I like Rumi, but Hafiz is really my dude. And then also for my to start my day, after I read these daily readers, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
Yeah.
So those are good to kind of set my compass in the morning, of just to be reminded of how beautiful life is, to be aware, not get agitated. I love the fact that the Stoics looked at anger as a sign of weakness, that we should be able to control our emotions. I don't think the Stoics ever had to deal with Los Angeles traffic, but I like that. And that pops up in Marcus Aurelius's writings and Seneca, and Ryan Holiday will mention that in his book. So I think anger is a real problem in the world. And I think that's one reason why, when I was younger, the cynicism thing, when I was younger, I tried to be a little political sometimes and a little edgy sometimes in my comedy, because my heroes, Bill Hicks, George Carlin, people like that did that. But as I've progressed as a human being and the way the world has gone, There's so many people that I love, my lifelong friends, who have very deep, different political opinions than me. And I think that I've been given this gift to make people laugh. My mom always reminds me that, as a comedian, I'm a healer. I help people forget their problems. So I don't, you never know what someone's going through when they're at a comedy show. And, I've moved away from that. And as I've gotten older, like I think most comedians, when they start out, they do dirty jokes because it's an easy laugh and you're in bars and you're things like that. So as I've gotten older, I'm trying to do the smartest material that I can do. And I think that all we have to leave behind in life is the art that we create. So I want my body of work to, be of benefit. And political jokes don't last. Also, that's another thing. Like Bill Hicks, as much as I loved him, a lot of his stuff doesn't. I mean, the guy was absolutely brilliant, but some of the political context is just from 30 years ago. And clean comedians like Brian Regan or Mitch Hedberg and clean, clever jokes are eternal. So, not that I don't, have a risque reference here and there, but I'd say for the last 10 years, I've been actively, I just want to do smarter, more intelligent, I put out a couple of clean albums, which when I was younger, I never would have thought that was something that I would have done, Oh, and so my main books, because I'm always reading and I always keep a book with me. And the next, what was the last book that I read? There's just so many books in my life, but so this is the one I'm about to start, and it's a biography on Aretha Franklin. It was the Sammy Davis Jr. Reader. That's what I read. I love biographies of people I admire, basically. And one of my favorite things traveling is I love to go to used bookstores, and I've compiled so many books. I've only read 2 Balzac books, but I've got, I think, 10 of them, just things that I've always thought I should have in my library. I'm a big fan of Voltaire's Candide. I think that's probably my favorite book of all time. And everyone I've ever talked to who read that book had a different interpretation of it. So when I see a copy of that in a used bookstore for $1, I'll buy it because I've given so many copies of that book to people. But I absolutely love Aretha Franklin, and I came across this biography recently, and that Sammy Davis Jr. Reader, I'd never heard of this book, and it was all these articles that had been written about him, and essays or stories that friends had written. I mean, he interesting guy. I mean, for a little while, he was in the Church of Satan, which was a little disturbing and weird. I think he had a drug problem for a long time. But he broke a lot of barriers. Like in Las Vegas, Black people were not allowed to stay in the casinos. And there was a part of town where they had to stay, even the entertainers. And he was so popular that he single-handedly changed that and said he would not perform in hotels or casinos where, Black people were not allowed to stay. So he was really the Jackie Robinson of entertainment.
He was, and he was considered to be one of the great entertainers of his age and maybe beyond. What made him such an exceptional performer when you look at him through the lens of a performer yourself, as a comedian, as a host, as an actor?
Well, he started out, his father, he was in this as a child. His mother was a performer, his father was a performer, and then his mother went off with some entertainment troupe in the vaudeville circuits. So he was raised by his father, and his grandmother lived in Brooklyn. But he was it was the Will Aston trio. And his dad and Will Aston, who I think was his uncle, he's just like, he's like 4 years old. And they taught him everything, the dance steps and how to work these vaudeville audiences. And he did impressions, and, he was just this lovable little kid. So, it was in his DNA. He learned the guy could wow an audience in his sleep. He was just so unbelievable. He could sing, he could dance, he could do impressions. And I think that guy, he had a lot of vulnerability and sensitivity and self-hatred that he overcame. And the guy was truly good-hearted, because once he was becoming a star, he met Frank Sinatra when he was really young, and then Sinatra helped them out get gigs in places like Ciro's in LA, which is now the Comedy Store. And like Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, all these people played there. And I forget the big club in New York. But once it was clear that Will Aston and his father were getting old, and he's in his early 20s, and he is electrifying people, and he was going to go solo, he signed a contract with his father and Will Aston that he would split all of his earnings 3 ways. So these guys kind of retired. He goes solo. So I think for like another 20, 25 years, he was a man of his word and split his income 3 ways with these guys to take care of them, because he was, so grateful that, they had raised him, shown him love. They were his family, and also had taught him all the skills.
I didn't
So,
know that. Oh, wow.
yeah, I don't think many people do.
Yeah, that's a
And I mean, and I just randomly found that in a bookstore in Eureka, California. I'm like, oh, hey, that's something I should invest $5 in.
mm-hmm. So that's Sammy Davis Jr. Back to you for a moment. We talked about how you're in a different place, which I would expect after 25 years in terms of how you're evolving and continue to evolve. And because you're a learner, people who are lifelong learners are constantly improving and growing and aspiring, even though there's
Yeah, that was
also
a transitional moment in my life when we
yeah.
met. We did that
In what regard?
because I had just started to take trips to London, and once I got in with London, that was the key to the international circuits for me. So then, once I got in with London, I got offered tons of work. I played all over England, and I continue to this day to do gigs all over Europe and the world. But it was from that time of taking a few trips to London, getting in with the best clubs. And then once I got in with England, that led to gigs all over Europe and then all over the world. And I got invited to, comedy festivals in Australia. And then I met a woman in Amsterdam and ended up moving to Holland.
That's right. And you live
So,
there. Yeah.
so that was before my European chapter of my life. And another thing is I'm completely sober now. And back then I still drank and partied. I thought that was part of being a comedian, to be the life of the party.
Mm-hmm.
And I was traveling all the time, so the relationship with the Dutch woman didn't work out. And I was just about to move back to the United States when these people from this Dutch television network saw me performing at a comedy club in Amsterdam, Toomler, the oldest, best club there. And they were looking for an American to host a late night talk show, or, a North American English speaker. And I got this job, and I got to stay and be on television. I hosted this late night talk show for 2 years. And what a dream come true. I never imagined that would happen. I grew up worshiping Johnny Carson and then David Letterman, and, to be the guy coming out from behind the big curtain with the $2,000 suit on and standing on the X and giving the monologue, and then go over to the desk, banter with my musical sidekick. And then, it was the whole template of, an American late night talk show. And what a dream come true. And then if that was not fortuitous enough, when that ended, and I'm still really good friends with most of the people that worked on that show. And the woman who put me on the network, she ran the network. It was ultimately her decision to put me on television. I'll never forget when she brought me in to tell me that they were going to discontinue the late night talk show. She said, but the good news is there was this very wildly popular travel show on the same network. And she said they had four presenters. And she said, we're unhappy with one of the presenters. So we're going to we want you to be one of the presenters. And I don't even speak the Dutch language. So not only did I have my own late night talk show and all their stars and celebrities could be interviewed in English, now I'm, hosting one of the presenters on this travel show. And I did a highlight on St. Petersburg, Russia, on Peru, the Champagne region of France, the Dutch Caribbean. I mean, it was just an absolute dream life. So, and I think all that helped me just my intelligence and world experience just manifested, you know, 20-fold from that period when you and I had met. So my worldview, my world experience, being friends with comedians all over the world. I had for the longest time, my dream was I wanted to make a television show where I would be like the Anthony Bourdain of comedy, the way he went around the world
Mm-hmm.
doing highlights on food. I know all of the best comedians from all over the world in all these different countries, where I wanted to make a show about, traveling and comedy around the world. About 5 years ago, I got really close, pitched it to CNN and Comedy Central and the Travel Channel, and they all ended up passing on it. But, that's showbiz.
That's showbiz.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was really inspiring to me. I don't think I ever told you this, but I remember seeing you take off on that journey, that international journey, and following your website and seeing some clips from the travel show. And I was going through a bit of a transition in my life around 2006, and so I decided to make a leap, and I moved to Malaysia for a year, and I taught at a university.
Wow.
So
Did you live in Kuala Lumpur?
I lived in a suburb about 40 minutes outside called Subang Jaya, which I probably mispronounced. I went into Kuala Lumpur, but that was an extraordinary experience. What I'd
Yeah,
love
they had
to,
a things have changed. And that was a place that I had a great example of when I was pitching to the networks. And I tried to film these little examples, and maybe you saw the one I did on Kuala Lumpur.
yeah,
And I think Canada does this in real life. And this was what Malaysia was trying to do. They had this one Malaysia slogan. So, you've got, Muslim Malay, Indian Hindu people, and then Chinese Christian or Buddhist people. And the comedians there are of those people, and they could make fun of each other's religions and ethnicities. And I was really impressed with it. You would think like a Muslim country, they would be more uptight, but in many ways, I found that they were more free than we were. But in the last 10 years, things really changed there. Some comedians got arrested for things they were saying, and this comedy club in Kuala Lumpur, the Crack House, was shut down. So I dated a woman from Toronto for the last few years, and she was a great influence on me. And the one beautiful thing she told me is that in the United States, you always say that you're a melting pot where people have to come in and melt into being a part of the society. Where in Canada, we say we're a mosaic where everyone is allowed to keep their identity and make this beautiful mosaic thing. And I thought, oh, wow, that's like everything I'm all about, And that's why I was so impressed with Malaysia when I first went there. I was like, wow, and this utopia, of ethnicities and religions, and everybody's, nobody's uptight, and they're happy and they love each other. But, so hang on, Canada. You're our only hope.
yeah, I think that's more of an
Like,
ideal.
I feel like
Yeah,
Princess Leia, the first Star Wars.
that's yeah, I think that's an ideal Canada aspires to. But within the current global conflicts and wars and issues, Canada's challenge now to uphold that mosaic. But let's hope that things move forward.
Yeah, and that's what that woman reminded me, that Canada
Yeah,
has a lot of issues and things, but from my perspective, it's at least you're making an effort.
at least you're making an effort. Yeah. Tom, 12 months from now, if we talk again, which I hope we do, what's one thing you're celebrating in your life?
I have an idea that might be a movie or an animated movie that I'm working on now. And the underlying theme and idea is about anger in people and society. And I do think we need to have a war on anger. We really need to try and control it, like the Stoics say. I think that's something I just started doing a little acting. I did a part in a friend of mine's movie. It's called American Spark, and I play an eccentric filmmaker who's introducing his avant-garde film at a screening. That was really great. It was this really fun character to play. And then I just did a very small voiceover part for a Disney animated show called Primos, where I played the neighbor. I was in one episode, but they're hopefully about to do a second episode. So I'd like to do more of that. But, I think I was put on this earth to be a stand-up comedian and make jokes and make people happy. And a good friend of mine saw me the other night and he said, "You're like a powerful soul singer up there." And I think, maybe it's, the countless hours of James Brown and Aretha Franklin I've listened to, but that was a big compliment. I've put out 6 comedy albums in my life, 7. So 12 months from now, I'd like to be celebrating another comedy album and or comedy special, I think. Yeah, because I think that's my gift mostly.
I will be first in line virtually.
You're the best. We haven't, we've always stayed in touch through email and everything, and you've been such a great supporter. And analyzing my handwriting at the beginning of this conversation made me feel just as good as it did way back when you did it on that tour.
Well, it was a pleasure and an honor. And thank you for being your usual wise, open, curious, and just a good sport all around. So, and you've inspired me for decades. So I appreciate your time.
That makes me really happy to know that, Jamie. Thank you. Thanks for the love and support. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.